This afternoon sessions, we're going to get down to more, I don't know how to say, not practical, but actually work that is being undertaken to address some of these issues. And our first panel is on international initiatives that are addressing humanitarian challenges. And we have a very interesting sort of spectrum of organizations. Because one of the things that I think we try to let people understand that besides the resource gap that Dawn, are you going to come join us? Please. That Dawn discussed in terms of the funding, there is also a very big knowledge gap because Ukraine has not had to deal with some of the issues that it is now confronted with. So the work of the foundation has been always to reach beyond, let's say, the Ukrainian American community, to bring in, like our Friends of Ukraine Network, but also to create relationships or partnerships with organizations that have that knowledge that is needed for whatever challenges the Ukraine is facing. So we have today, and I'm going to let each of them sort of introduce themselves a little bit, but like I said, the full spectrum. We have Olka Ritsak, who's from the Ukrainian National Women's League, who has for decades been involved internationally, worldwide, in humanitarian projects. Dawn Calabria, we first met when she was part of the Refugees International organization that went into Ukraine. What year was that? 14 or 15? 2015. And was perhaps one of the first organizations to come out with a comprehensive report on Ukraine, which was extremely helpful to have somebody who does this worldwide come into Ukraine and give a perspective from an expert and objective. And frankly, we were pleased with some of the findings that they had. Of course, also, they pointed out the challenges. So Dawn has been involved with us since then. And then most recently, TAPS, which is the organization, which is the largest NGO in the U.S., has been working here for 25 years to help surviving military families that have had a military death, I think. And so they've been working, they work in various countries, and just this few months ago, they opened up a chapter, TAPS Ukraine, in Dnipro. So they have now, so Ukraine will greatly benefit from their experience. Last year, their budget was $18 million. They assist 85,000 families, so they have a great depth of experience. And finally, we have Patricia, if I mispronounce your name? Sheikh, who very graciously agreed to come to our forum today. They have just been very busy with their own work at the UN, but I was very pleased that she was willing to come because, as was already mentioned earlier, Ukraine has a huge issue with landmines. And so to have an organization that started, and I'll let her explain it, Mines to Vines, and now is part of Roots for Peace, to have them here to share their experience in other countries. So as I say, I think we have the whole spectrum of organization and entities that are going to help us understand not only the challenges, but perhaps the response to some of these challenges. So maybe I will start with the order I sort of started with. And Olka, if you can talk about a little bit about the work that you've been doing regarding the humanitarian situation. For instance, I put out a call right after the Sea of Azov crisis about the children in Berdyansk, and can we do something? It was Christmas time. Well, very quickly they reacted and had some projects going on for the children of Berdyansk. So we'll start with them and then go down the line. So.
My name is Olka Ritsak, and I happen to be a Ukrainian American. I was born in the States in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I've been a part of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America for many years, first as a member of Branch 4, where we were young 20-year-olds, very excited about leading our colleagues to different understandings of the Ukrainian movement, to when our Branch 4 disbanded, I joined another group, Branch 75, which is also very active, and as a result of the Maidan activities and the war in the East, has been very reactive in helping with families and, of course, soldiers who have had negative impacts of all kinds. I happen to be the social welfare chair of the Ukrainian National Women's League of America, Союз Українок Америки, since about a year ago. And in October, I actually had a chance to understand better some of the different organizations that we work with, because I had a chance to actually spend 2 weeks in Ukraine, where I actually even met Leta Soborana. So that was really very cool to see. One of the things that I, as an educational psychologist, talk about with my colleagues is that a family is as happy as its most unhappy member. So what I want to say is that it's not the same with a Ukrainian family in Ukraine who has a soldier in the war, but I think there are some parallels. So these are some of the things that we've been working on. So we want our soldiers to be as healthy as possible. So what have we been doing in that effect? Well, one of the things that happened was I, by chance, happened to be in the trenches. And the trenches truly are just holes in the ground surrounded by mud. And when we were talking with the soldiers, they were telling us how they sleep on boards. And we decided that as a comfortable kind of thing for them, we would actually have a collection of cash. As Dawn said, cash is better than sending individual packages. And we were able to collect money for camping-type mattresses so that our soldiers would be more comfortable. It may seem like a little thing, but when you're sleeping on a board and you get a mattress, it's comforting. The next thing, a soldier, of course, we know, may be wounded or serve the ultimate and actually die. Well, what happens is we try to support the wounded soldiers by donating all kinds of funds to hospitals in Dnipro, in Lviv, in Kyiv, and we, whenever we can, support by offering laboratory instruments. So now we've learned that it's better to provide the funds for the laboratory instruments than to actually donate instruments that may not be effective because of their systems or their different understandings. Another thing we have decided to do is support families of soldiers who've been wounded. And what we do is we commit to a 3-year adoption. We have 80 branches with 10 to 50 members. And what we ask the branches to do is to fundraise and donate $300 per quarter to families who have wounded soldiers or who have had husbands or wives who've been killed in battle so that they can get some kind of support. We find that children are very much affected by what's happening. And through the Garrison Church of St. Peter and Paul in Lviv, we've been able to donate funds for different kinds of camps. And within the camps, there not only are activities such as games and perhaps some religious conversations, but also therapies in the areas of art and music. And if we looked at some of those paintings, it would be interesting to see what the children were going through as they were responding by painting. I think all art is a kind of therapy. It doesn't have to be formal. One of the things that we've been doing is supporting a church in Severodonetsk. We're very cognizant of the need for buildup of community, and there is a very dynamic priest there, Dr. Yuri Yurchik, and he was in Dubai for 3 years, serving 15,000 parishioners. And he's now a dynamic force in building this incredible community center and church. And we've been helping by, I think someone said money goes a long way. We were able to support with $25,000, and they're already, I just got a message on Facebook today, completing the remaining first floor that we contributed towards. How else do we support? We also have seminarians who we support. We support the Lyceum in Boyarka, and we find that even dealing with basic needs, such as washing machines, sometimes it's affording a very basic need that allows people to be at their best.
My name is Audrey Bogelsteig. I am the Vice President of Survivor Services for TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. I am also a Navy veteran, served in the United States Navy for 4 years, as well as a survivor of military loss. My husband, Jason, was serving in the Navy as well when he went overboard from his destroyer in the Pacific Ocean and was lost at sea 22 years ago. I came to TAPS as a survivor and received the support that I needed to be able to stabilize my life and to be able to take some tentative steps toward the future. And I do the work I do in honor of my husband and to help other people cope through the loss of their loved one through military service as well. Is that right? It's TAPS Ukraine. We were able to take a delegation to Ukraine in January, at which time we signed a memorandum of agreement with the mayor of Dnipro. That was pivotal in allowing TAPS Ukraine to stand up and begin to structure programs and services for the families of the Ukrainian fallen. And he's working on a video I hope to be able to show you.
На аматорському відео видно імовірно російський танк на півдні України. Російський президент Володимир Путін кидає свою тінь на кордон Європи.
Російські військові прориваються в український військовий аеропорт у Криму.
Мы разговаривали с ним последний раз 24 августа 2014 года. В Украине это большой праздник, и связь была очень сложная, но я все-таки смогла к нему дозвониться. Я не знала, как сказать детям. Я понимала, что я справлюсь со своими чувствами, но мне было безумно страшно сообщать об этом детям.
Ну, мой папа, наверное, так сложно об этом говорить, но за свободу, и он очень хотел, чтобы страна, в которой живут его дети, она могла полноценно развиваться, и чтобы здесь все было в порядке. Боролся за свободу, за независимость и, в первую очередь, наверное, за нашу жизнь, за жизнь нашей семьи.
З 2014 року від 12 до 13 тисяч українців, військових та цивільних, загинули, захищаючи свою батьківщину. Це була велика честь – допомогти цим сім'ям, які вболівають серцем, дати їм модель поведінки, щоб вони поділилися своєю втратою і гордістю за свого героя, щоб стояти поруч, коли вони відчувають біль втрати. Державний департамент звернувся до ТАПС і попросив нас співпрацювати з українською делегацією, щоб створити програму, яка буде вшановувати загиблих бійців. А зараз, після декількох років співпраці, ми виховали організацію, яка називається «ТАПС Україна». Це цілком українська організація, яка складається із сімей, рідні яких загинули на війні. Це було честю – зібратися із українським керівництвом і сім'ями загиблих, щоб підписати історичний меморандум, який окреслював надії, які вони покладають на ТАПС Україна, щоб заспокоїти, підтримати та надати ресурси всім, хто вболіває за загиблими бійцями.
Коли ми вперше приїхали в Україну після того, як ми підписали меморандум, було важливо встановити зв'язок із сім'ями. Ми знаємо, що відбувається щось неймовірне. Ми маємо нагоду зібрати людей, які втратили родичів в одну кімнату. Ми зібрались приблизно з 70 членами родин зі всієї країни. Це були батьки, які втратили дорослих дітей, подружжя і навіть діти, чоловіки та жінки. Чудово, що це надає можливість для кожного поділитися своєю історією, таким чином, яким вони не мали змоги. Ми ділили з ними їхні сльози, ми ділили обійми і, не дивлячись на те, що розмовляли різними мовами. Іноді ми користувалися словником, а іноді все, що було потрібно – це сльоза. Тоді ми просто потискали руки та ділилися тим, через що пройшли. Це було вражаюче.
Хороший девиз в ТАПС «Подобные помогают подобному». Это дает очень близкий контакт с человеком, который прожил горе. Позвони ему, ты можешь всегда сказать: я через это прошел. Давай я расскажу, как я это сделал.
ТАПС Україна проводить блискучу роботу і дає нам уявлення про їх життя і їх скорботу. І це дає можливість відверто поговорити про те, чого вони потребують, що ми можемо зробити для того, щоб допомогти і підтримати, як ми можемо допомогти один одному, як вони можуть бути частиною всесвітньої організації. Це було честю – об'єднатися з українськими сім'ями загиблих бійців та цивільних, які боролися за свободу, та принести їм надію, ресурси і підтримку, надати їм модель, по якій будувати організацію, щоб забезпечити їм ту зону комфорту, якої ми досягли, і для того, щоб створити всесвітню організацію спокою і піклування.
So forgive me, I don't speak Ukrainian. I tried to prepare, but for those who don't speak Ukrainian, I just wanted to share a little bit of what we covered in the slides, in the video. Coming together with others who can intimately understand the experiences of recovering from a loss is an important part of stabilizing a family. Stabilizing the family leads to stabilization of a community. Stabilizing the community stabilizes the country, et cetera. Dealing with the traumas of war is an important part of our healing process. And the sooner we can get to families who have experienced those traumas and give them the support that they need to learn precious coping skills and to support one another, the better we stabilize our communities and our nation. So one of the things that we do when we have had a family who's had a loss, and we have more than 6,000 people who come to TAPS every single year, is we connect that person with a loss to a person who has had a similar loss. If my husband died in combat, I would be connected to another wife whose husband died in combat. If I have children, that wife also would have children. And we want to make sure that we get support for the children as well. One of the major programs that we have is Good Grief Camp for children. We bring children together from across the country, and they pair with a member of our military, and they spend a whole weekend at a grief camp, experiencing the highs and the lows, and learning how to develop coping skills to take with them for the future. One of the discussions we had with our Ukrainian counterparts was how can we help them model their program in a way that makes sense for the Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian people, and provide that same type of hope for families. So you saw the meeting that we were having with a large group of people. We were conducting some training on what the TAPS America organization looks like so that we could help them see the structure that we have, in addition to then building on the programs and the services that we have available so that then they could take that and model that. One of the resources we have for our families is a book on how to cope with the loss of a military person. The TAPS Ukraine organization has taken that book, translated it into Ukrainian, and is now providing that book to families who have experienced a loss. We are committed to coming alongside our Ukrainian counterparts and helping them with all of the tools and the resources to provide the grief support and the psychological healing that's going to be necessary to have a stable Ukraine and move forward and have productive citizens who aren't coping with their trauma. So we have a delegation that will be going back at the end of the year to conduct more training, to meet more families. It is our hope that eventually we will be able to get together more American families and Ukrainian families so that we can have joint programming and help them to see the magic that we are able to create. At the end of May, we will have a national seminar in Washington, D.C. We'll have approximately 1,500 family members coming from across the country and around the world. We will also have a Ukrainian delegation who will be coming to observe our programming. And from that, we will be looking at next steps to provide more value for the TAPS Ukraine organization. Are there any questions?
I think the other thing to point out is, which I always point out because of the Putin propaganda, most of the people speaking were speaking in Russian. So it doesn't matter if they're speaking Ukrainian or Russian, they're defending their country and they're suffering together. And as was stated in the video, when they met, they didn't speak each other's language, but sometimes all it took was a tear in the heart.
We may speak different languages, but grief is universal and loss is universal. And when you see a tear in another person's eye and you know that they are dealing with the same type of loss you are, the language matters very little. And I've been able to connect with other widows who, just knowing that we had that in common, that we just fell on each other and we were bonded as sisters. And I think that it's important for us to be able to see that, because truly, we are out of sight, out of mind if we're not connected to the global community. We don't want to put our heads in the sand in America and not know the challenges that our Ukrainian brothers and sisters are encountering. So we are committed to tell the story of the struggle for autonomy and to support your families as they are coping with the same losses that we have.
My name is Patricia Shake, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Programs for Roots of Peace, a nonprofit organization out of California that works in war-torn countries and also countries recovering from war. I don't know how much you know about Roots of Peace, so I'll tell you a little bit. Our headquarters is in California, but I'm here in Washington, D.C. And a little bit about my background. I came from the U.S. government. I am an agricultural specialist in terms of not only the production, but the processing, the harvesting, all the way through the value chain until that product gets to a consumer's table. So when Heidi, after I retired from the U.S. government, working in both international trade and also development, so when Heidi Kuhn, the founder and CEO of Roots of Peace, asked me to join after a brief stint with the Corporate Council in Africa, helping U.S. companies invest and African companies invest on the continent, I came to work for Heidi and her organization. Some of the countries that Roots of Peace, they were established in 1997, and actually for some of the women participants in the audience, you might find this interesting, because she had seen a Lady Diana on television, and she was very struck by her commitment to remove landmines all over the world, because it was really something that was her passion. And Heidi, coming from California and coming from an area near the Napa Valley where grapes are grown and where the land is respected in terms of the agricultural bounty, she came up with the term Roots of Peace, the peace coming from the ground. And so she was struck by Lady Diana's comments, and they had worked very closely with some of the initiatives that Lady Diana had. Some of the earlier countries that Roots of Peace has worked in include Croatia, and in that country she got Greenwich Estates, and Mr. Gergic was from Croatia, and he went back to his homeland because at the time it was riddled with landmines, and they cleared out all the landmines, and they have since restored the land to productivity. She's also worked in the West Bank. You can't get any tougher than that. Cambodia and Angola. And currently she has two major programs. Sometimes we use private sector funding, so we don't have one model that fits all, and sometimes we use government funding. We don't actually clear the landmines ourselves. We're not experts in landmine removal, take out landmines or unexploded ordnances, but we do work with our partners, primarily the Halo Trust and the Mine Advisory Group out of London, out of the UK. I shouldn't say London, out of the UK. And sometimes we've worked with the Norwegian People's Authority. So once those landmines are removed and the land is cleared, and then we can go in and we can rebuild and replant. And we sort of work our model backwards, if you will. We don't go in like a lot of development agencies and say, oh, what can you grow on this land? And let's do that. We say, what is the market potential for particular horticultural crops, because they're high-value crops? And where are these markets? Have the markets been broken? Can we reestablish the markets? And then we do it that way. That way, when we know that once we have cleared and brought the land back to productivity, that we have a market for those crops and the farmers can benefit substantially. And I'm going to talk about Afghanistan, since that is a country where we are heavily invested. We have been there since 2003. And our bottom line has always been and will always be to improve the lives of smallholder farmers, including women. So we don't have a separate program for women. We have a program for farmers, and we want women to be integrated into the value chains that start with the crops in the ground, that then move to processing, that then move to distribution and the marketing of those crops. So they're all together integrated in the full value chain of what work we do. And the reason why we chose agriculture is that the FAO has estimated that 60% of the world's population is dependent on agriculture. That's a huge number. A lot of countries, including Ukraine, they're large producers of crops, and so makes sense. And 45% of that population are women. So women make up a large majority of the population, and oftentimes they are subsistence farmers. They are not making enough money to take care of their families. And so this, we thought, needed to be corrected, and this is why we don't have separate programs for them. In Afghanistan, 80% of the population is dependent on agriculture. So it's even more important in a country like Afghanistan. And it may not be unusual because there are countries who have high numbers like Afghanistan. So in 2010, the United States Department of Agency for International Development entrusted Roots of Peace with additional funding. As I said, that we were working there since 2003, but they gave them additional funding, and they wanted Roots of Peace to go into the remote villages, and through a program that they do call, and it will end at the end of this year, the Commercial Horticultural and Agricultural Marketing Program, or CHAMP, what we commonly refer to as CHAMP, and to train the farmers through all of that whole value chain that I mentioned. Prior to our work, exports in those in the commodities that we worked in, and we worked on grapes, not for wine production. Obviously, we wouldn't go into a Muslim country and do that. So they were table grapes and spices and other dried fruit like apricots, since they were at one time large producers of these crops, and they had markets, contrary to what a lot of people think, in the subcontinent and also in Kazakhstan and other areas that were surrounding Afghanistan. So we went in and we worked in these remote villages, working through the Ministry of Agriculture and extension workers that they had, and also people in the villages that we knew were leaders in the villages, so that we wouldn't have a problem with people who lived and worked in that region. So the experts were relatively flat until we started introducing proper chilling and processing facilities. And then through our work, now remember we started in 2003, and it is forecast by the end of this year, the exports will exceed $1 billion. That's phenomenal for a country that is still at war. And we have reestablished the trade routes to India. We have reestablished, as I said, some of the trading with Kazakhstan, some of the trading to Dubai in the Middle East. So it goes to Dubai and then off to other countries in the Middle East. And through our programs, about 4,000 women, Afghan women, have benefited. So we're very proud of that number. And we have also trained women in basic food quality and post-harvest handling. And we have given them the business skills and the management skills that they need to run their own businesses. And lastly, but not leastly, we have encouraged women to participate in our trade shows that we have. We just came off of a trade show in February at Gulf Food in Dubai, and we had women representatives there, and also in deal making across all sectors. And last year alone, 5 women-owned businesses signed deals worth more than $3.6 million. So there's change. It's slow, but women are being integrated into the value chains. Let me just give you a few statistics so that as I wrap up, and then we can take questions later, just so you can see that over a sustained period of time, what we've been able to do in Afghanistan. We have created more than 9,300 full-time agribusiness jobs. We have created over 230 storage facilities for holding of this fruit before it's sent off to wherever it's going, so it won't spoil. We have trained over 12,000 farmers at our farmer field schools, and we have trained 113,000 farmers, including women, in improved agricultural techniques. And one very simple technique that we use in California that wasn't being used in Afghanistan was to make sure that the grapes were not just, the trellises were upright and not on the ground. You would think, oh, that's such a small thing to do, but it improved the yield tremendously because the crop had somewhere to go and then it had the sunlight. But prior to our coming in there, that's not how they were grown. We have worked with 38,400 families that have benefited from our value chain approach, and we have planted more than 2.85 million saplings and rooted cuttings of fruit trees in Afghanistan. So I'm going to leave you on that happy note. There's much more work to be done in Afghanistan, but I think if we can work in a country like that, then I can certainly see possibilities in the Ukraine.
We see, first of all, we moved the humanitarian issue under our economic security task force because it really truly is part of the security issue. And I think this panel and discussion is actually further proof of that you cannot, the separation is not valid. In other words, it has to be integrated into the overall security issue.
We need livelihood-focused programs that help people figure out how they can survive now and prepare for their futures. When you go to the eastern Ukraine, the farmers and the local merchants complain that they've lost their markets because they used to be on the other side of the line of conflict. And they complain about how difficult it is. What do they do with their produce? What do they do with their products? And a program like that could help them. The international community is running some small livelihood training programs, small business skills, keeping books, having a business plan, but they're tiny compared to the needs. And it's been very difficult to get increased emphasis on that. In humanitarian crises, which unfortunately parts of Ukraine still are in, the emphasis is on keeping people alive, which obviously is very important, so food, water, healthcare, shelter. But at the same time, we have to be working. We should be able to do two things at the same time. So Ukraine has got to defend itself, but it's also to help its society, its civil society grow and have opportunities to do new things if the old things can't be done anymore. And I think the things that have been presented here also deal with one of the primary issues the victims of war experience: loneliness, sadness, grief, because of their losses. They've lost their homes, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their communities. In some cases, they've lost their churches or their mosques, and they've lost their ties. And obviously for those who are casualties, who've suffered a casualty, who've lost a father, a son, a husband, a child through landmines or another kind of military thing, that sadness needs to be addressed, and their ability to reconnect with the society, which of course is what the TAPS program is trying to do, and also what the Ukrainian women are doing in terms of reaching out and saying, you're not alone, we care, we're going to try to help maintain the institutions that are really important to you. As she said, giving a soldier a mattress may not sound like much, but anybody who's ever slept on a board or the floor knows there's a little bit of difference. And you know that somebody knows you're doing something. And so I would encourage everybody here to think about ways that they can help connect people who are suffering. And I would also ask the Americans in the room to urge your legislators not to forget the importance of these kinds of small programs and the dramatic difference they can make in people's lives and in their confidence and their ability to work hard on the many things that Ukraine has got to work hard on.
Grief can look an awful lot like depression, and if you are expected to be productive, you have to be able to work through that. Your physical symptoms, the emotional, the social symptoms, it can create withdrawal. It can make it difficult to just get out of bed. And if you can't stabilize a person from an emotional standpoint, then moving forward and doing things like, creating a new career path or, developing an alternative economic source can be incredibly difficult. That's why we're also doing work, not just in Ukraine, but in almost 30 countries, including Afghanistan. We also have a program in which we are working with Afghan widows and mothers, and they are creating Afghan hope bracelets that then they export, and we are selling through our site, and then that money funnels back into, goes back to them, and we are able to work with widows there on the ground in our office and develop, some economic opportunity for them. So we want to be able to recreate that type of thing also in Ukraine, and so I'm very interested to hear your comments on that as well.
Any questions?
What type of barriers did you find in Afghan women for reach success in your project?
The role of the Taliban, at first the women were very, very reluctant to come out and be a part of any type of organized activity. But I think once they saw that we were giving them hope and that they had an opportunity to take care of their families, then it sort of changed the tide. And using the women in the local villages, we couldn't have done it. We couldn't have just walked in and said, here we are. That would not have worked. So we had to work through the local villages and the leaders. But the women had been very oppressed. But once they started making money and taking care of their families, it was like a snowballing effect.
For the beginning, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your big heart. I want to say thank you from all our delegation. Thank you. Last week we was in UN in New York, and we understood there is no unique Ukrainian problem. Our problem is similar the world problem. So thank you for support. And I want to ask you what in what way we can share in your case in Ukraine, now our delegation, in what way we can sharing the best practice for our Ukrainian colleagues. Thank you.
Having an awareness that TAPS Ukraine is an organization working with families in country is a great place to start, and then connecting locally with the TAPS Ukraine leadership to see what initiatives they can undertake. I know that they will be looking for additional funding so that they can begin to conduct programs for not just the adults, but for the children as well, and develop materials, translate some materials, and they're looking at how they expand and what makes sense for their families. So being able to network with TAPS Ukraine directly, I think would be a fantastic start. And then, supporting them as they stay further connected with us and really look at what our programming has been able to do. I would say that's the biggest start.
We've agreed that we would work together. Bonnie Carroll is an incredible dynamo. And so we do plan to continue working. But the question I had is, do you see TAPS Ukraine building chapters or expanding throughout the country, or what is your vision of that?
In America, the way we conduct connections across the country, in part, is through care groups that we've stood up in almost 25 states now have care groups, and we're continually expanding those and developing local programs. So it's not a chapter per se, but I guess in one way. I know that they are discussing that, whether or not they are going to have other areas of Ukraine or if they're going to stay centralized. We've given them our model, and what they do with it is going to be uniquely theirs. So we can support and continue to show them our model, but I suspect that they'll continue to expand across the country.
since you are a large agricultural producer, you should really talk to your government officials and to look at the structure of your agriculture, how many women are involved, and whether or not there are programs that they can help. But just to ensure that those programs aren't a one-off. You're not just working on production, but you're working on that full value chain so that the women can benefit, and the men too, from those programs, and also the international organizations and what they might be able to help you with, like the World Bank or even the UN, because sometimes countries give funding specifically for particular projects.
I want to mention here, one of the initiatives that we are working on is actually an initiative of Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur. It's called Seeds of Hope. And frankly, it, I think, very much has some of the goals that Roots for Peace has, that you have enumerated. Marcy Kaptur has been a champion of women, particularly in the rural areas. And this initiative was to help women in rural areas who are doing, have agricultural projects, to elevate their production and get things to market. So everything you were saying in terms of how you approach the issue really seemed to fit very much into the discussions we've been having about Seeds of Hope. The other thing, I think, when I was twisting Patricia's arm to come, no, I just, but just was the fact that particularly in the Donbass, when we think about the future and the redevelopment or trying to rebuild of Donbass, at this point, Donbass has been a coal mining industry, has been the dominant industry. And we have heard from any number of experts that that is not any, it doesn't have any role in the future economic development of that region. And so I think it behooves those who are interested in Donbass to be looking at what are economic opportunities in the future. And I think, Patricia, what you said is not going in and say, let's do this and that, but really taking the time to understand, first of all, the environment, right, the ground. And I liked your approach, particularly about high value, looking for high value reps. So really thank you for your coming here and sharing this, because I think it fits right into what we've been discussing.